cheers to everybody who's arriving. People have actually come. Oh, there's Daisy. I'm gonna get her in. Hi, everybody that's joining. People have come. This is so exciting. We're just waiting for
Oh,
Daisy to
this is so
join.
exciting. Oh,
There
gosh,
she
my
is.
face is big.
I know. I'm
There
like,
we
oh,
go.
I'm huge. Hello, how are
You
you?
look amazing. I love that dress.
Thank you. I am not used to putting stuff on my face.
I know.
But I'm getting
Cheers. And
used to it
have you
again.
seen the product?
Cheers. Cheers to everybody joining. Everybody cheers us. Um, Here's
Hello.
to wine and books
So
and
lovely to see you all
lockdown.
coming in. Hi. I've not seen anyone in about 1,000 years. It's like I've been in a fairy tale in a cave. So I'm so happy to be here.
I can't believe there's a lot more people here than I was expecting. This is great. I thought it was just be you and me
I see
drinking
Lucy
alone.
Wine. I see Lucy Wine. Hello, Lucy
Cheers,
Wine.
everybody.
Cheers.
So yeah, I just want everyone to Zoom their friends afterwards, chat about what me and Daisy have talked about, drink. It's the only way we can get through this. I know that I feel really good after I've hung out online with people. I'm like, we're all alone in our houses, but actually we're together.
I've just
And
seen Felicity Jane 5, hiya, saying wine and books, living the dream. Like, yes, yes, all of my favourite things. Well,
hang
firstly,
on, I've got a book and everything.
isn't it maddening that it's all because it's flipped over? I want you all to imagine very hard Holly's book, that cover, but in reverse, because it's like the way I see it, it's the like
Oh, is it backwards? Oh
yeah.
yeah. Whoa, trippy.
Like we're in a spooky universe. Congratulations on your fantastic book. I just like tore through pretending. I remember opening the post, and I get quite a lot of book post, and honestly it's not often that you know, I'm always very delighted and very, very lucky, but it's really rare that something makes me yelp with joy, and it's really, really rare that I stop whatever I'm doing and be like, I need to read this now. So I couldn't stop doing it. And all of my friends as well, they were so jealous that I had a proof, and they were all like, you know, nagging and desperate to know, because they're all such huge fans of yours. I think I'd like to start, if I may, by saying, if I want you to introduce us to April like she is your
Okay.
pal, because I felt very much like she is my good pal after, you know, the pleasure of spending that much time with her. Who is April? Why are we gonna love her so much?
So April, in the book, is a woman who is 33, and she just cannot get past date 5 with men, because whenever things start kind of going the right direction, she like is herself, and men are like, oh, we don't like this. Like, why aren't you perfect? And she works for a kind of a charity that helps young people, and she works with lots of victims of rape and sexual assault. And she is also a survivor of that herself, and she kind of thinks like her trauma contaminates her. And after a date just goes so very badly wrong at Gordon's Wine Bar, which is where all bad dates come to die. If you live in London, you'll understand.
I love
Um,
the way you wrote that, because Gordon's Wine Bar has a particular smell. It's like going into an abandoned swimming pool, and you really get that sort of fetid, like, whoa,
it's
when you're
just a
back.
smell of like broken hope. When you realise, oh, people are like, we've got love for Gordon's Wine Bar in the comments. So anyway, after a promising man turns out to be not promising, she just loses it, and she decides she wants to finally feel in power. So she basically goes on a sting and pretends to be this perfect woman called Gretel, who is like a manic pixie dream girl, slut girl next door with no problems, and she's everything that April believes all men want. And she's like, I'm going to make a man fall in love with me, and I'm not real, and I will finally have the power. And she meets Josh, and the book sort of begins. And that's April.
The thing that's so perfect about Gretel is her name. Did that come to you straight away, or did you have a few different guises before you were lashed in that one?
It was always Gretel. Whenever I kind of want a character, I'm like, I'm so this, I'm so that. In my head, there is that woman who doesn't exist, but who I use to beat myself up. and she is Gretel. I don't know where it came from. It's just the sort of person that you would meet who's just come back tanned from their sabbatical, and
The
it's
sort of
just
person who
so,
does really good, perfect tiny plaits. They've never done a plait that's like stuck out at their head. They're like,
yeah, they're like their messy bun is always on point, and they're just like, do you think it's like cultural appropriation to get my nose pierced? And like that's the only thing that they might worry about because they're just so chilled otherwise. And it was only like when I gave it to my editor, and she's like, "Oh, so Gretel, that's like Hansel and Gretel, and she's like the house of sweets to like lure in men, and but it's actually there's a hidden dark witch inside." And I was like, "Yes, that is what I meant." No.
I love editors. I love that they all kind of interpret work as though they're like, you know, they're doing a degree in it. And like, oh, I feel so high
I
and
know, I
mighty.
feel so intellectual. So yes, that's
Have you
Gretel.
ever channeled your inner or outer Gretel on a night out? Have you ever used an alias, or even if you've not,
No,
if you just sort of chat, you know, had a sort of a Sasha Fierce moment?
I think I think any time you're like meeting somebody and you want them to fancy you, you pretend to be a lot better than you are. You're just sort of like stuffing all your unlikable traits into a cupboard and just kind of going, no, don't look in there, don't look in there. Look, I'm great, I'm great, I'm great. And I think to some degree that's normal, and that's sort of what the book
Mm.
looks at, like how much of us are pretending to be people we're not in order to win love, and how that can be funny, about how there can be like a darker side to it. Um, I think Gretel's like the cool girl, you know, the rant in Gone Girl,
Mm.
about the cool girl rant, which I like studied a lot and read lots of think pieces about when I was writing this book. I think every girl, and I think particularly as you're younger, I don't want to age discriminate for any of my younger readers out there, but I'm 33 now. And I was definitely more of a cool girl when I was 23, whereas now I'm just like, I'm just too tired.
Oh my
I'm
god, for
just tired.
sure. A billion percent like this, the nonsense I pretended to like in my 20s. And I do think it's complicated because, to a point, when you're in your 20s, you don't know what you like and you're trying stuff on. You're like, maybe I do like Vindaloo's, maybe I do like the ultraviolet work of Quentin Tarantino. And then, you know, not only do you get comfy, it gets, you know, important. I wanted to ask about imposter syndrome because I think when that is such a, um, it's something that I think has, sometimes I feel as though it's a little bit overused because well, who does not have that in some form or another, but it is something that we talk about a lot. We talk about how it affects women, and there is no syndrome. It's a very deliberate act of being an imposter. How, and I was thinking about this a lot. I've been, again, sneaky proof, not to plug another book that isn't your fabulous one, but I've read Pandora Sykes' brilliant book that's coming in July. She's got a really great essay about authenticity and, you know, the lies we tell ourselves and, you know, the fakeness of the realness and what it all means. How do you think people go about sort of being authentic? How do you find yourself when you're young and dating and finding kind of definition and coming up against stuff and, you know, trying on all these different guises?
God, I think it's tricky. I think in order to be authentic, you have to know yourself. And obviously, the younger you are, the harder that is because you've had less time to get to know you, if that makes sense.
Mm, it
Um,
does.
and I do think to some degree, there's something to be said to kind of using your you know your younger years as you know you are just figuring it out, and sometimes you can only figure it out by living.
Mm.
Because I write for teenagers as well. I always have it in my head over like, yeah, part of growing up is making mistakes, and that's fine, and that should be embraced. But I also kind of don't buy into this. You have to just be completely fucked up and completely fucked over by people in order to reach enlightenment. Like I kind of feel like you can dodge that bullet and still be enlightened. You don't need to get yourself traumatized or completely sell yourself out or have parts of your life where you look back on, you're like,
But
oh,
you, the architect of those mistakes up to a point. It's not like, you know, just because I think as well that's something that, you know, women aren't really are socialized to do, you know, have those horrible experiences, and often just because we're told that we can't, you know, make a fuss, or and I suppose that's, you know, what Gretel does and who who she is a lot of the time is sort of, well, she is like her availability. I thought it was so interesting the way you write her, the way she kind of is and isn't available.
Yes, it's um yeah, like writing the Gretel chapters. And so for those who haven't read the book yet, there's chapters where Gretel kind of comes in and explains why she's great and why men love her and why men fall in love with her and why she's so fanciable. And it is to some degree because she's just the perfect mixture of bland and exciting. But she's kind of there, and she's not got any difficult personalities, and she's not had any trauma in her past, which might make life difficult for you. And she's not got any strong opinions, but then she has got an edge to her. And she does stand up for some things, but not things that make you feel a little bit uncomfortable because you're slightly problematic in that way. She's just always, and she's available for you, and she'll have sex with you, but she doesn't do it for other guys. And I kind of, wanted to explore the fact that I believe that so many women, particularly straight women, are constantly tiptoeing that line between the slut and the whore and being, independent, but also vulnerable. And all this is just tying ourselves in knots to be loved. And because we think, because the sort of performative way in which we live as well with social media and comparing ourselves to other women, we are convinced that other girls are that chill and other girls are that mixture of both. And so we've got to pretend, otherwise we're not going to get loved. And so it's also like, so I used Gretel in the book to kind of be like, it can be quite a sexist book with lots of generalizations made about men and women. It's also to do with like Gretel's about like hating men, but it's also about hating women and how women just always compare themselves to other women and are always using other women to beat themselves up to win a man. Sure. And it's very not good. So I just wanted the book to explore that sort of stuff.
I keep sort of smiling really inappropriately because at the corner of my eye these really like lovely, cheering, sweet, supportive comments from everyone watching, and I just
hi guys, thanks for watching. We're glad you're here.
I'd not really thought about that, but that's such a great point, that it deals with internalized misogyny so well that of course we don't really give kind of enough time to the idea that we all grow up in this patriarchy, a world that was, has been designed for hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years, to work for men, by men, and women are kind of an afterthought. And it's not even, I think a hatred of them or deliberately excluding in lots of cases. It is just not thinking at all that women are anything but inconvenient. And when you grow up in all of those invisible systems and things you don't even realize, like why, if you grow up in a world that doesn't value women, why are you going to value other women? It's really, really hard to be a good member of the sisterhood.
And I do think to some degree we are sort of socialized into thinking that a man's love is the prize and women are the competition to that prize. And I think it's really hard to unlearn that. And I remember even like as a teenager, like if a boy fancied my friend, even if I didn't fancy him, I'd be like, why did he fancy her? And it was like a slight on me that somebody else was attractive, even though I wasn't attractive, and it's always messy and strange.
Like it's a choice between you and whoever, like you're just being rejected in your head all day long, all the time, because that's what you're told is like, no, you have a value. You're like, it's you are the prize, and you don't get the prize if you're not a good enough prize.
Even if you don't want the prize, you want men to fancy you even if you don't fancy them. It's like, what's going on? What is crazy? And then so whenever I forget those thoughts, I'm like, okay, this is something. And so the book is looking at the complete sort of psychological mess that goes on in your head if you're a woman and you love men and you want to find love, but you find men problematic and you find the way that you act towards men when you're in love problematic, and you want equality but you're struggling to find a guy who matches your political levels and will understand you in the way that women can understand you, and just all that mess, which kind of gets condensed to like the very pure human need, which is to want to be loved, to want to connect, to want to be in a relationship. Like we're wired for that.
And not to do a massive spoiler, but
well, be careful, guys.
Ultimately, isn't it, that it's not that And I think, this is in the best books with sort of a love story at their heart. You kind of know. I mean, there are twists, and it keeps you guessing, but you're rooting for things, and you sort of, you'd have been a cruel writer if the love story didn't go a certain way. But that's not what's much, much, much more interesting is April's evolution in terms of how she understands her humanity and the humanity of others. And, that she transforms, and she stops seeing it as sort of in terms of kind of gender and men want this and women are this, and it's very much the breadth of sort of people who are loving and vulnerable. How did you find yourself feeling that as you wrote it, or did you always sort of know that was going to be her journey? Did you have I hate saying journey, but did you have a journey as you were writing?
The question that I wanted, that I was asking myself throughout the book was, is it possible to write a romantic comedy about Me Too? Is that possible? Is it okay? Is there room for that? And so that was sort of the journey I went on, because I believe that humour is an incredible vehicle to explore the darker parts of the human experience. But obviously things to do with Me Too and rape and sexual trauma, can you go there with comedy, and can you put a love story there? And so I just really struggled, and I did so much research. But then one of the things I learned, talking to so many survivors, and obviously I've worked with lots of survivors because I'm an ambassador for Women's Aid, it's just these women have love stories. You're not the worst thing that ever happened to you. And these things happen and you can't change them, but you want to go out there and you want to be loved. And yet you've got this thing that you're carrying around with shame, even though you shouldn't have shame because it wasn't your fault. And at one point you're thinking, in order to have an authentic connection with this person I'm falling in love with, I'm going to have to tell them this thing that happened to me, which is nothing to do with me, but it's everything to do with me. And I just wanted, to tell that love story, because unfortunately 1 in 3 young women are sexually violated by their partner in this country. 1 in 3. So that means 1/3 of women who, if they leave those relationships and go on dating, are carrying that trauma. It's not, and they go on and they meet men that understand. Oh, they're frozen. I have on my screen.
Yeah,
in the most
with gesture, you look very you're saying profound things, which you are. Hello, I hear sound.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear us? Will you give us thumbs up if you can hear us? Oh, a noise. Somebody said, we can hear you. Yay, we're back.
So sorry about
God.
everyone. I don't know what happened.
I hate the fucking lockdown. We should all be in a bookshop, not having to deal with this.
You've been that lovely Tottenham Road, Waterstones basement. I suppose the nice thing is that you can be here wherever you are. It's not a London thing, but
thank God you guys can hear us. I think I was saying something really smart as well, and I've completely forgotten it.
You were flying. It sounded so profound.
It was, I basically had the meaning of life sorted, and you guys just missed it. Thank you guys for holding on through that. I can't promise it won't happen again, and we'll try and go back now into litical. I'm on my second glass of wine. Literary analysis.
I'm desperate to ask you this, so just in case we do get cut off again, I'm going straight in. April does some amazing activities and different sort of exercises and things to get through what she's experienced. Let's talk about the boxing.
The boxing class, okay. So part of the wanting it to be a romantic comedy and wanting it to be a hopeful book, even though it deals with some really dark stuff, was April finds a boxing class for survivors, which was something that I had been researching happened in South America, but and I think it's starting to happen in London, but it's kind of women who have experienced sexual violence basically meet up and just punch the crap out of stuff, and then have a sort of share circle. And I wanted, because I spent a long time researching the book, like reading about trauma, reading about PTSD, reading about how it manifests, reading about how to get trauma, reading about the polyvagal nerve, all this stuff.
Tell us about that.
So the kind of idea is that if something happens to you where you something terrible happens to you, like sort of sexual assault, is that trauma gets stored in your body, and your memory is made differently, and that's sort of how PTSD works. And so and that can attack this thing called your polyvagal nerve. I'm not a psychologist, but there's this idea that it kind of hyperactivates the nerve that runs from the top of your head down your back, that kind of prepares you.
I just see my friend Jo, looking fabulous. She's mentioned her friend Hazel Gale, who is kickboxing and is starting something like this in East London, I believe. So, sorry.
Isn't it? Yeah, no. Survivors in East London. Once the lockdown's over, let's just go to punch stuff. But and yeah, so writing April was tricky because I was writing in their head with somebody who has trauma. And so she's very skittish, and her polyvagal nerve is like blah 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 blah. Overactivating. She sees danger everywhere, but then she's also not alert to danger. She doesn't trust herself. And I just wanted a reader to be able to get into the head of somebody with trauma, because I really wanted people to understand what it's like, and especially with Me Too, and how it's all been in the news, and like, oh, this guy being taken to court is ruining his life. His life's being ruined. He might have to go to prison because he raped someone. And I just wanted to show like what it's like actually for survivors, to live in a traumatized body, and to live in a traumatized mind, and try and make sense of their life after that happened to them, and how do you find hope, and how do you get that trauma out? And there is a lot of evidence to suggest that, beating the crap out of something, not a person, a bag, can actually help get it out, along with therapy and stressing environments, and lots of other stuff too. But so that's what the boxing classes are about, and they were my favorite part of the book to write.
I loved reading them so much. This is a bit like Hollyoaks. If you're affected by the issues raised on this show, I would definitely recommend to anyone listening who's finding what Holly is saying so useful and moving and wants more, Tarana Burke's interview with Brené Brown on Brené Brown's new podcast. She is the woman who founded and started the Me Too movement, and she talks in such smart and incredible detail about trauma and sexual violence, and specifically how when people are called into court to give accounts to what happened, like, well, of course their memory is terrible because they have spent every day and every moment of their lives trying to forget it. And there's a book that I'm desperate to read that I've not read because I was busy reading your amazing books. Is it called The Body Keeps the Score? The Body Knows
the Score. Yeah, that was my Bible writing this book. It's an incredible book. Yeah, The Body Keeps the Score. And that I read a lot about that book like 5 times, and interviewed lots of psychologists who specialize in trauma and memory, and just wanted the book to be as true as it could be to the dark parts of it, as well as it providing hope. And I think you can only provide hope if you really, really understand how trauma works, and you're not just kind of going, oh, you'll be fine. It's like, no, this is what happened to you was dreadful and awful, and you're never going to be the you that you were before that happened. And that's, I think, something that like the book explores, is like April's grief at what she could have been if this hadn't happened to her. And maybe to some degree Gretel is the person that she would have been if it wasn't for what men had done to her. And to some degree I kind of feel like Gretel represents what all women would be like if it wasn't for men. And it's like this weird circle where men ideally, again, I'm massively generalizing, but like men ideally want women to be chilled, and they want them to be confident, and they want them to be not screwed up about sex, and they want them to be this, and they want them to be that. But the reason they're not like that, and they're such hard work, is usually because of the patriarchy, which is sort of run and organized by my men, even subconsciously. So it's just like Gretel is just the thing that might be able to happen if it weren't for So it's like this catch-22. It'd be like, I would be a chilled girlfriend if it wasn't for you.
I do think it's a really, really hopeful book, and it's wonderful as well because Gretel isn't like, you know, she absolutely is April. She's not this complete sort of like, you know, mad invention, but she, as you say, it's what I loved about her is she is able to, it's taking out the stakes. And I was thinking about, you know, dating days and being really, really, really obsessive and making the stakes crazily high for myself. And it's ironic really that Gretel isn't, well, her MO is very much, you know, kind of revenge initially, that she's able to be Gretel because she's like, well, what if there were no stakes? What if this was just like some guy and I was behaving however I wanted to?
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what Gretel is. She has the ultimate power because she's not putting her heart on the table. And that was the other thing that I kind of wanted the book to explore, because although it, you know, April makes lots of generalizations about men and how much power they have, you know, one of the things I wanted to explore with when it comes to like the difference between what you need to be like to date someone compared to what you need to be like in order to have a healthy, fulfilling, emotional, physical, sexual connection with somebody and have lifelong love. And it's like the opposite of what dating is like. You know, dating is all to do with boundaries up and this and wait this long, and actually that it is this pretense. And actually when it comes to falling in love with someone, that's the opposite of that. You know, you have to basically just get out all your shoddy bits and get your heart out and just take this leap of faith and just be like, I love you, please love me back, even though I think I'm awful. I think you're great.
When you said I love you, I just saw someone said a heart that drifted up.
That's my friends. My friends are here this evening. Hi guys.
Hi.
This was supposed to be our Zoom night, so they've just come to watch me at work.
Oh,
hi guys.
I'm honoured to be part of your Zoom night. But something that I do think this book does so brilliantly is dating culture. Now, it does feel like it's really shrouded in mystery when I think about, you know, until, so to be that absolute, I don't know, I was an absolute addicted Love Island fan for a long time. And then I stopped watching it because I felt that I couldn't watch it without thinking of the many, many tragedies that now sort of surround the show. But, you know, like TV dating, I'm addicted to that. Or, you know, I've been a Made in Chelsea viewer for a long time, and it's so weird, isn't it, how we dehumanize each other and we put all these obstacles. And it really does feel like, if you read anything about modern dating, it's no different from like, oh, you have your lace fan and he takes 3 steps away from you and he turns round and he tells his friend to send a letter with a wax seal. And you know, this is about confronting all of that, which I loved, and really, in the best possible way, taking the mystery away. Like, more than I think all the time how I don't know how it's such good bloody luck that I found a person that I love. And if I was single now and trying to work out what to do based on all the articles and the features and the things I read, I feel like I'm going into the convent, it's easier.
Yeah, I had to do a lot of research about, because I wanted to like work out, well, what are you supposed to do when you date? What are the rules? Because I've been like a long-term monogamist my whole life, so I've just not, you know, like there's so much that I write that is part of my personal experience, and then a lot that I don't. And then part of me was like, I've not been the person on Tinder before and all that stuff, so I had to spend a lot of time, yeah, interviewing people and going in it, and then but also like reading all the advice. And so I bought every dating book that exists and read them all cover to cover, like to try and find Gretel's voice and try and work out. And it was all just batshit crazy. I was just reading it, just going, oh my God, if this is what you need to do, like I can't date. I won't be able to do any of this. It was just ludicrous. It was all, yeah, also just like and it was also hypocritical. It was kind of like, you've got to be yourself, but don't be yourself. That's awful. Don't,
Not
you know,
that
not
self.
that bit, not
Ooh.
that bit, not that bit. And, you know, it's like, you've got to just act like there's an abundance of people that you can fall in love with, and you've got to all put them into the funnel. I know that loads of men can fall into the funnel. It's just like, so many single women I know that I speak to are just like, if you meet one guy out of 250 who isn't like flopping his dick out on his phone and like behaving like a nutcase, you're like, oh my god, maybe I should marry him now. Like, you're so excited. The idea that there's this abundance of like opportunity, like there's this real scarcity mindset, I think, particularly for, yeah, women who have high standards. And why wouldn't you have high standards if you're trying to find somebody to spend the rest of your life with and to give your heart to and to be vulnerable with? um and yeah, these books that I read, I was just like, this is just insane. And because I'd also done a lot of relationship training counseling at the charity, I was just also like, this is just the opposite of good relationship advice. This is just, I mean, obviously you don't sit down on your first date and then be like, right, crack my knuckles, this is all the horrible things that have ever happened to me from age 2 till today. You know, like, you've got to stagger it. But to pretend that you're not, that you don't care, that you're going on dates and you don't care, that you're not looking for this, you're not looking for that, you'll just find the wrong person. That's what I think is, you know, these games, the people that they work with aren't people worth giving your heart to. You know, you want somebody who's a bit like, you seem great and we're really getting on and there's chemistry here, but like, I know there's more to you than this because you're a human being, because there's more to me. And let's try and create a safe, sexy, safe space where we can slowly reveal each other to each other.
But I do think that it's something that affects women everywhere, and you write it so well in terms of dating, like in our careers, in our bodies, that we're supposed to do everything perfectly, but also make it look like it was an accident.
Yeah, the effortlessness. and
Mm.
and that was like, again, when I read the Cool Girl rant in Gone Girl, you know, that was that whole kind of breeziness. And I was like, you know, fourth wave feminism has happened since then. Surely things have changed. And I was like, no, we're still trying to be effortless, like to make it look easy is just slightly different. So you're like on the women's march, but you look hot, you know? And like, you look really good in a bikini, but it's because you're a vegan. It's just an accident. Whoops, I'm a vegan, you know.
You're only vegan because you care about the animals so deeply. It's not, you know, disguised orthorexia.
Yeah, it's just like all this stuff.
You just actually love yoga and you're weirdly good at it, and you've never ever like fallen over or farted. I have to tell you, I've been doing a bit of Adrian to keep me going during the lockdown, and I always Google like relaxing yoga, easy yoga, yoga that's less than 20 minutes. And I did a thing where you're like, your tabletop, so you're, you know, on all fours, and you have to kind of take your right hand and get your left leg and sort of reach under and somehow pull it out. And I actually pulled out a fart. The timing was
front fart or bottom
fart. It was like and I thought, I'm so happy that, because that's the sort of anecdote I'd want to tell on a first date, but I think it might not get me a second date.
Well, I just do. I believe that, I don't know. I remember when I was going back into dating after a very long time out of it, and somebody said, if it's meant to be, there's nothing you can really do to fuck it up, and if it's not meant to be, there's nothing really you can do to make it work. I mean, you know, obviously don't like turn up naked, or maybe that might work with the right person. You never know, but you know, it's just like, it's just the right guy would love your I farted like uncontrollably doing yoga Variana last night. What did you do? You know, it's I think that the healthiest connections in friendships, in work relationships, and in love come from owning and having respect for your flaws and being confident enough to be vulnerable with them and to laugh at them. Like, to me, that is where the magic happens in any relationship, when you're like, oh my god, this really awful weird thing happened, and somebody's like, me too, and you're like, ah.
It's actually
great.
Brene Brown, isn't it? It's vulnerability and empathy. And I've been listening to lots of the old personal development podcasts, and something that keeps coming up is that basically you can't make anyone like you, but equally it's quite hard to make anyone not like you. That people will, every single person in the world will respond to you in a way that's really very much kind of coming from them in their head. And if you're not that kind of person, you know, if they hate you, that really is probably has very little to do with you, unless you're like farting at them. But if they just love you, that's actually got very little to do with you either. But that's kind of great, because you're not obliged to keep doing the things to make them love you, Gretel style.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to like. I try to remind myself with my writing as well. It's just I can't control if people are gonna like my stories or hate my stories. And one thing that I found particularly about like my fiction is like it's really Marmite. Like I really provoke a strong response from some people with my
I'm
books.
agreeing. I'm like, no, it's brilliant. It's the best book in the world.
You know, but people are like wonderful about them, but then people are just like, you know, not like it's rarely bland. And I think anyone who's watching this who wants to be creative, I'm like, I see that as a badge of honor. I'm like, you want strong responses. Even the bad ones are good, because that means you've tapped into something. And like you know, it's fiction's about trying to find the truth through something that's make believe. And the truth can sometimes make people feel deeply uncomfortable. And so I
that book says you can't be everyone's cup of tea. And I think someone said it's better to be the right person's glass of whiskey than everyone's cup of tea.
Oh, I like that. That's a great one.
I don't remember who said it. It wasn't me. I wish it was. But I'm curious about the fact that you now are writing kind of in two spaces, and I think that's a big overlap. And looking at the comments, I think people love all of your books for all audiences, but some are very much written with, I guess, an audience of teens and young adults in mind. And so, I think it's pretty much entirely to do with like with publishing and packaging and bookshops. No readers actually care. But as someone who's got this absolutely, you know, dedicated adoring fan base who are not casual readers of you, like proper fans, moving into a different, I suppose, area, do you feel as though, is it different for you to write? Were you writing with them in your head, or did you have to go to a place where no one was in your head and you were just telling the story?
With me, like the way that I write fiction, and this is just what I do, it might not be the truth for other people, but I have to like physically embed myself in the brain of my character. Like I crawl in and I'm just kind of trapped in their body until the first draft is over, just because like, oh, I have to write my way out of this person's head.
But that's so amazing. I think that's why I love it so much. The knowing people's thoughts, the intimacy of them.
Yeah, I think that is, you're aware when we were chatting on the thing yesterday, but like I think you're aware as a writer of like what your strengths and weaknesses are. I'm very aware of my weaknesses, don't get me wrong, and I give myself a hard time about my writing a lot. But I'm, you know, on a good day, I'm like, I know that I think why people like my work is that ability that I seem to have, and I don't know why, to transcend into somebody's head and to get my reader to transcend into their head as well, so that we're kind of together looking out at the world through this person's eyes and through the tapestry of their past experiences leading up to the moment before the book existed.
Do you think that has much to do with journalism and working for the charity, when you had to really understand a huge number of different stories and you're kind of immersing yourself in lots of different people's lives and identities?
I think for sure. Yeah, I think, 5 years just having people pour out their hearts to you, you know, gives you an idea of the general themes that all of us struggle with. And because I worked for an online charity, it was even more sacred, because obviously there was that barrier between people opening up. It wasn't a phone line, it was you wrote in. And that barrier made people be able to delve even deeper. And potentially, you know, if I was a psychologist, like you would probably take like 15 sessions to get to some of the stuff where people would just say it straight away because there was this anonymity to it. from the internet. And so through that, you could just see all the problems that people thought were unique to them, that were shameful, that they were the only ones who thought this way or had this sexual problem or had this trauma. Or it was an amazing privilege, because with the numbers of that, you saw, sadly, more than sadly, just tragically, how normal so much of this was. And so I guess to some degree that's what I want my fiction to do, is to normalize trauma, not because I think it's okay, because it's not. And that's why I do lots of work and activism with Women's Aid, to try and make sure that it isn't normal that 1 in 3 girls are traumatized by a partner. You've got to fight for it as well, but there's so much shame and stigma and silence. And I think fiction can hopefully really help people feel seen, but also help people who might not have had that experience understand it.
Yeah.
But I do have to transplant myself in. And the difference between adult and teen is just the measures are different. You kind of got to, like when I write teen fiction, you have to kind of really remember what was important, which is like, 6th formers were celebrities at school. You were just obsessed with them, just they had a common room. I just remember being like fantasizing about the day I could go into the 6th form common room. Like that used a lot of my thoughts.
Like they had a kettle. You could have a cup of soup for lunch if you wanted.
You could wear your own clothes. Like you had a special entrance. Like there's stuff that, when you're 15, like, whoa. And so it's just remembering those markers. So that's all. But the only difference is just remembering that if you're writing about a 33-year-old, they're likely to be maybe worried about their fertility or whether or not they want to have children. And a 15-year-old is going to be like, will I ever lose my virginity? And why did Jenny not like me in maths today? And they're equally as important. But it's just you have different markers.
The way the pub punctuates your day, isn't it? If you're a casual pub goer, if sneaking into the pub. Underage drinking is very bad. Don't do it. But I do think that we never lose that. And I think it's really, really sad if we do, the intensity of everything just mattering so much. And I think it's quite comforting as well a lot of the time to remember how intensely you care about things and feel about things. And in a way that it's that hopefulness that you're talking about, that everything that just feels impossible and insurmountable and painful, it can pass because it has passed and we know when it's passed.
Yeah, and I think it's just what matters to you matters. And that's the other thing I try to do with the books, especially in like pretending, is I wanted to write a story where I was like, it doesn't make you a bad feminist if you really, really, really want to fall in love with someone. Like that's totally fine. That matters to you. So it matters. You can't, and you should, like, to just not minimize any problem. And like, I don't know, a 33-year-old worrying that they might not be able to meet someone before they can have children, that problem hasn't got more weight than worrying about being a virgin when you're 15. Like, because actually the level of worry and preoccupation and stuff. So I just try to not ever patronize my readers and to just meet them at their level, and be like, no, what matters to you matters. And actually, by writing the story, hopefully you'll realize this matters to a lot of people. You're not crazy. You're not the only one. There's no shame here. Like, let's shine a light on this. Let's try and understand where it's coming from. Let's ask questions about it, because that might help actually dislodge it and make it matter less. And yeah, because I just think shame just does terrible things to people. and it breeds in darkness, and it breeds in ignorance, and it breeds in spending lots of time by itself. And so I just, if my books do anything, I just hope they help release people from shame. And even if it's like being really sad that you have to go to Gordon's wine bar, like that's it is a real problem.
That amazing, like, is it shame dies when you expose it to the light?
I think so. I think I've nicked that. I don't think that's mine. Somebody's gone, well, we can all go up to Gordon's and drink in person.
Can we do some questions?
Never. Let's do questions. All right, people send questions in and I will try and answer them.
Let me ask. Oh, while we're waiting, I just wanted to ask you about Tori. I know it's really tedious for you. Me and Ollie had a bit of a research chat yesterday because let's be real, we were both quite anxious about Instagram Live and how that's going to work. So we had a nice old
And it's gone so well.
but thank you so much for hanging on in there. You know how strongly I feel about your brilliant novel before this one. How Do You Like Me Now? Tori, you said, you know, that you think of her as being unlikable. And I really didn't feel like that. I loved her.
I loved her too, but lots of people found her unlikable.
Oh, we can park that for later. I see. What's your favourite book to write? From My Nose in a Book. What's your writing process for a book? From Tessa Bickers. And what book do you wish you'd written? From Kimber Bellina.
Okay. What was my favourite book to write? It was one of my YA books, actually. I don't know if I've got any of my YA audience in the house, but the book that I had the most fun writing was It Only Happens in the Movies, just because the research for that was just joyful, because I just got to watch every rom-com that ever existed. So that was my favourite book to write. It wasn't that hard going compared to some of my other books. Like, it's just about like romance, and there was, you know, Holly Bourne dark in there, but you know, it was more fun. What book do I wish I'd written? Or you could come at that from so many different angles. I'm like, commercially, you know, the Gruffalo would be really good. Or, you know, David Walliams, you know, just to have his bank balance.
I love it. We just want to get paid.
I'll tell you a book, the last book that I read where I felt like sick with jealousy, which is always a good sign, was Free Women by Lisa Taddeo.
Oh, and I'm so glad you say that, because I feel like, oh, she's very, very clever and brilliant, and I'm very happy for her that I'm not allowed to be like, oh.
It's just amazing. And I had written Pretending at the time I read it, and was worried about Pretending, and worried that maybe some of the things I was implying about female sexuality and stuff wasn't right, or, you know, I was like, oh. And then I read that book, I was like, it's fine, because what I loved about it, even though I hated about it, was how much she shines a light through her journalism on the fact that so much of female sexual desire comes across from how desirable you are, and how much of your arousal comes from being chosen, and how, like, and I think she writes some line about the very worst, most painful thing to a woman is being irrelevant. Like, a man can treat a woman as like with irrelevance.
Oh god, because that's the heartbreak, isn't it? Of I can't remember then. I know Sloane with the threesomes. She seems like the most well-adjusted, ironically. But there's the teenage girl having the awful affair with
Maddie. Oh.
What broke me about that was the obvious abuse, but it felt like the abuse was less in the sex than in the manipulation and the waiting and the fake relationship that he was constructing, and the way he manipulated her soul.
And it's just how easy it is to do, especially to a teenage girl. Oh yeah, so that book I just had so much respect for. I just think she's amazing. I think I bought like 7 copies. I met her once at dinner and just scared her with my intensity, which I do a lot to people.
No,
so.
I'm jealous of you, Holly. No, I'm jealous of you.
She was like not impressed. I was just like, ooh. She was just like, ooh.
It's so weird though, because she wrote, it was like 7 or 8 years, wasn't it? It was a long time of like being locked down and writing, and then to come out into the light and have this book, and I was like, oh my god, it's you.
It was crazy. Yeah, so that is a book that I wish I'd written.
What is your writing process for a book? And I don't know if we can, I know we probably need to roll it up and roll it along. So I also see, so that's Tessa Bicker says, what's your writing process for a book?
My writing process.
_PopCBD_ says, how long does it take for you to get the outline of a book done?
Okay.
Oh, and Laura and Andrew says, what's your advice to anyone who wants to write but can't get inspired in their house and during the lockdown? I feel like there's a commonality in this.
Yeah. And so for my process, I can't, again, this is what works for me. So if you're thinking that's not my process, that's fine. That doesn't mean that you're any less a writer. It's just find what works for you. So my process is I can't write a book unless I've got the first line. I have to know the first line. I'm like addicted to first lines. They're my favorite thing. Like, open a book, what's the first line? I love them. So with Pretending, it was, I hate men.
The first page, my God, the manifesto was everyone.
I'm very proud of that
I've
chapter.
got about 9 WhatsApp groups where people have been sending those pages to me for the last week or
Have
so.
they really? I did crowdsource that page. I did like ask a lot of people like, why do you hate men? And people just came at me with such like specific things. I was like, this is just gold. So yeah, I need a first line. Then I normally know what theme I want to explore, and a vague idea of a plot. And then I research and I research, and it's like my research is just, I just like bloat myself like a puffer fish until I feel like I could win a mastermind by talking about that. So with
Do you
pretending
have
it was like,
a time frame for that, or does it take as long as it takes? Do you get to kind of a month or 3 months and think, oh, I need to write something, or do you just keep going?
it depends on the book. Some books you need a lot of, you don't need much research, and some you really, really do. But I know that once land on a first draft and I have to start writing, I can't, if I stop, it's dangerous. Like I just need, like a fish, I just need to keep swimming and just keep swimming. Like, otherwise I'll just lose
Lots of
it. So,
aquatic metaphors here.
sorry, my wine. um, so
Right,
when
like
I'm finally ready to land and I have my first line, then yeah, I just write, and I write like a shark. I keep going forward. I don't reread anything that I've written until I've hit the end. So it's like a massive game of chicken with myself. Um, and that's because I know if I even start reading it back, I'll think it's terrible and I'll hate it. And I'll be like, why am I allowed to do this for a living? Like, when's Jeremy Beadle gonna like pop up and be like, surprise, the last 10 years of your career have been a massive hoax, you suck. So I just know that first drafts are terrible. And so I may as well just get to the end, and then I've got a book, so I may as well try and make it into something. So that's my general process. And then I have to edit it a lot and a lot and a lot and a lot. And that's when the work comes in. And then how do I write in a lockdown? Not very well. I am really, really struggling to write right now. So sorry, anyone who's waiting for my next book. It's going to be a while because I just can't concentrate when our Prime Minister is in intensive care. Like, it's just, and I got coronavirus.
Oh my God, I can't believe we're just coming to that now.
I know, I got
How are you
it. I'm
feeling?
so basic. I got coronavirus. I
I
was just
think
like, oh, I even
that
got it
sort
on the
of
peak.
leads on to the next point. And I do think that while it's not like, oh, just like, you know, eat a raw egg first thing in the morning and you can write during a lockdown, I wish it was that. But I think it's really, really comforting to hear that, you know, it's hard. And even someone who's done it there's so many times really successfully is finding it hard. So I think last question from Kieran_MH. It's got a great question, I think. How do you protect your mental health when writing about distressing subjects?
Oh, I don't know if I do. I went a bit crazy writing pretending, like being in April's head. Um, with, in the head of someone with trauma, I found really, really challenging. And she's like, yay, my question. I found it hugely challenging, and I had to stay in her head for the book to be true. And but I was skittish and easily upset, and very angry. Um, and so the way I guess I protect myself from that is I'm very strict with my word count each day. And the moment I hit 2,000 words, which is my aim word count, not happening in lockdown, just not. But reading is just as good as writing. So at the moment, I'm just reading a lot because I'm like, that feeds your writing, so that still
Oh,
work.
I will definitely teach. That's a great thing.
It
Reading
does. Like,
just as good as
reading is
writing.
50% of the job. So I'm like, okay, just read. And I'm getting some stuff done. But normally, before the pandemic, if I was writing something troubling, I had a daily word count and then I stop. Even if I'm in the flow, I don't keep going. Um, so what I tend to do, I only had to be in April's head until I hit word count. So what I do is try to just, I'm like, oh, just get this out. Okay, hit word count because this is hard. And then I park it and I don't come back till the day. So I think if I was the type of writer who did a little bit and I went away and did a little bit more until, like 11 at night, so that's how I think I don't think that's intentional, but by answering that question, I'm like, no, that's how I do it. I work in a block and then I compartmentalize the story because it is really hard writing about these things. You get very emotional. And
And
so I just park it in that space and then come back to it the next day and then go for a long walk and have a bath and watch lots of Made in Chelsea.
Do you have to kind of, like the physical space, do you need to do it somewhere that you can kind of go away from? And
No, I can write anywhere, and I had to learn how to because I spent the first 5 years of my career um, working full time at the charity and writing my books around a full time job. So yeah, it took me 5 years to be able to be a full time writer and 6 books, and so I had to write on my commute. That was the only time I had. I had like 42 minutes on the 8:32 to London Bridge, and you know, it was just somebody's like armpit, like, and I knew where to stand, where the doors opened, and I knew which chair I could normally get next to the man who covered his whole face with his jacket, and just I never knew what he looked like the whole 6 years I was commuting, and that was the only time I had, and so I'm very unfussy because of that. Oh no, you've frozen just at the end. No.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Come back to us, Daisy.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Although I think we're pushing our luck now.
All right. What do you do when you're furious at the patriarchy?
I write books.
Great.
And I get drunk with my friends. So anyone who is furious with the patriarchy, I have emptied my glass, but I have more. I'm not usually a drinker, by the way. I'm like a real Ravenclaw normally, but like anyone, I just want any friends who are in this group, like watching this, like go have a Zoom after this and like chat about it. It is good for us to talk. I do think just women and the sisterhood help dispel so much of the anger because it's shared. And you don't feel like you're crazy for being angry. People are like, I'm fucking angry too. And you're like, yeah.
That's what I do when I'm furious at the patriarchy, because it's the women in my life who boost me and lift me up and make me laugh. Laughing is the best thing you can do, I think.
Laughter. So all of you go and just laugh with each other after this. And yeah, I guess we're out of time. I'm so happy people came, and I hope you guys like the book.
Thank you so much for joining us all. It's been such a privilege to be in your phones or whatever you're watching this on tonight. And thank you, Waterstones, for having us.
Yes, thank you, Waterstones. And yes, for those of you who have ordered a signed copy, I know that there's been a bit of a delay, but they are now on their way to you, and I've signed more. So you can go order it if you haven't got it yet. Anyhow, they are starting to be in the post. I'm sorry that you got like punished for pre-ordering. That's not cool. But it is weird Corona time.
Worth waiting for, I absolutely promise. Just think of all the lovely, you get that much longer to look forward to it, and it is so good.
Oh, thank you, Daisy, as well. We'll probably chat a lot later.
Can we do this every week?
Let's just do it every week. I'm just like, I know the password to get into Waterstones now. I'm just gonna just come in and be like, I'm Lee Child. I'm moustache. Does he have
oh my god, we can dress up. We can dress up.
Okay, it's gonna be great. All right, thank you guys. Happy lock-in. Wash your hands. Keep your distance. Stay safe.
Easter, everybody.
Happy Easter. Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.